Okay, today's the day. I'm going to introduce close to every single chess variant that's played by many people around the world that you may not have heard of, if the only chess game you've played is the standard 8x8 chess that we all know. So, to do that, I've come to pichess.org. I'll put the link on the screen when I edit this video. And the reason I'm here is because pichess is a sort of collection of variants. It has a very, very small player base. It's just intended to have many, many, many variants from the standard ones to some that are very unique that are created by the PyChess community. The first three tabs are just sort of standard. You're probably able to understand them. These are a bit more complicated, but they're just bigger versions with fairy pieces, similar to stuff like Sarawan chess or Capablanca chess. And then the new army variants are usually a completely unique set of pieces against the standard chess army. But the bottom three ranks are games that were not created recently and have existed for at least, I'm going to say 200 years. Okay, Chinese chess. Chinese chess, Xiangqi, let's open that up in the analysis board, is very similar to the first game of chess that sort of resembles the modern game called Chaturanga from ancient India. In Chaturanga, the rooks and knights were the same. Pawns could not move a double space on the first turn. The bishop moved exactly two squares diagonally and could jump over pieces. For example, bishop f1 to d3 was a legal move, but bishop f1 to c4 or b5 or a6 was not. It's only exactly two squares. And the queen was also much weaker. The queen could only move one square diagonally. In general, a lot of the variants I'm going to show you have either multiple very, very powerful pieces or a collection of weaker pieces compared to normal chess. Standard chess is one of the few games where there's one clear, very, 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 very strong piece. Going back to Xiangqi, Xiangqi has multiple new concepts. One, the pieces move on the intersections rather than the squares. Two, the board is bigger. Three, there's a river on the middle of the board, which I think represents the fact that there was a river between two warring nations in medieval China. And in Xiangqi, pawns move and capture forward. And pawns promote after crossing the river, after which they can't transform into any piece, but they can now move sideways. In addition, the elephant, which is the same as the elephant of Chaturanga, it moves like a bishop, but only exactly two squares. In addition, the elephant cannot cross the river. Another piece in Xiangqi that's unique is the cannon. The cannon moves like a rook, but can only capture by jumping over another piece. For example, currently this piece in the corner, which is exactly the same as the chess rook, is defending this knight, which is called a horse in Xiangqi. If this rook were to move, then this cannon would be able to capture the knight without being recaptured. So the cannon jumps over other pieces. Then there's another restriction on piece movement. This is the palace, or rather, it's just these intersections, these 9 intersections. And this is the king. It moves orthogonally, so one step every direction but diagonally, and it is restricted to just the palace. These advisors, the pieces next to the king, are also restricted to just the palace, but they move diagonally. The other major variant that's similar to Xiangqi is Jangi, which is the Korean version. In the grand scheme of things, it's quite similar, but there are quite a few differences between Jangi and Xiangqi. Next, we have the Japanese variants called shogi. Shogi means game of generals. And these variants incorporate the Crazy House mechanic. Or rather, Crazy House incorporates the shogi mechanic, because shogi dates to a long time ago, like 1700. Or at least this version of the game does. We'll talk about the history of shogi in a little bit. So, as you can see, when you capture a piece in shogi, it becomes yours to drop on any empty square, and that will constitute one move. Shogi also has the concept of promotion from chess, but pieces promote in the last 3 ranks in this box here, and every piece promotes to a specific other piece, and every single piece promotes. It's not just the pawns. However, the king and these pieces called gold generals do not promote. These 4 pieces, the gold and silver generals, move like kings, but they have restrictions. The silver general cannot move sideways or directly backwards. The gold general cannot move diagonally backwards. And then the piece that's unique to shogi is the lance. It moves directly forward. And the shogi knight can only move to these 2 squares. Shogi has quite a bias towards forward movement. All the pawns and the lance knight and silver general, the gold general does not promote, they all promote to gold general. However, these pieces, the rook and bishop respectively, promote to rook plus king and bishop plus king. Before we go on to the rest of the shogi variants, I'm going to show you Tai Makrup. This is very, very similar to Chaturanga, except instead of these elephants, the bishops that can only move exactly 2 squares diagonally, we have silver generals, as in shogi. Otherwise, this game is very, very similar to Chaturanga. We also have Burmese Citoyen, which is a placement game, but again, very similar. Okay, now we can finally tackle all the shogi variants. To go about this in order, I'm going to open another application that I think you should definitely download. It's called AI. And it's a Java application. You can download it at a link that will be the page is open. You can see it right now, but the link will be on the screen when I edit the video. Okay, so this is AI. Ignore the board game on the screen. It'll all make sense in a little bit. But if we go to the choose game screen here and scroll up, we have all of the chess family organized in a similar way as to Pi Chess. And right now we're going to look at this shogi folder. Shogi can be grouped into the sort of modern variants, the oldest of which here is from the mid 1700s, as well as standard shogi and the historical variants. Shogi started with much larger games, which slowly became smaller over time. The first of these was Heian Dai Shogi, which is not on this application because we don't know much about it, and we're not certain of its rule set. On the other hand, I don't really know because some of the other games that are added to this site have extremely complex rule sets that we know even less about. So that's just the question of maybe the developer not knowing about this variant. But anyway, Heian Dai Shogi was, I believe, 17 by 17. And it had a smaller counterpart called Heian Shoshogi. Sho and Dai mean small and big in Japanese, respectively. After Heian Dai Shogi was Dai Shogi, which, when it loads, looks like this. Dai Shogi has some powerful pieces, including the bishop and bishop plus king and rook plus king that we saw before. And it also is the first variant to include the lion, a piece that we'll talk about shortly. It also has a whole array of much weaker pieces, similar to the silver and gold generals of standard shogi. But Dai Shogi eventually became even smaller, becoming Chu Shogi. which is 12 by 12 rather than 15 by 15, like Daishogi is. Chushogi has most of the major pieces of Daishogi, but it cuts down on a lot of the weaker pieces, making the game sharper. To look at this lion, I'm going to bring it to the center of the board. The lion moves like a king, but it can move twice per turn, which means not only can it capture farther away, like so, what it can also do, I'm not even sure how to do this in this application, but I think you double click. Yeah. It can skip its own turn by moving away and back again. This is a pretty old application, but if you want to play this game for yourself, you can go to lishogi.org, where you can play this against other players. There's a Discord server where you can find people who are able to play a game. It looks complicated at first, but after a few games, you'll get the hang of it. It's not that bad, and it's really, really fun. This is, in my opinion, and the opinion of quite a few other people, the best chess-like game ever created. Back to the lion. On Lishogi, to skip a turn, you move to any other square, it'll highlight green, and then you just go back. The lion can also make pieces disappear, so sort of magically, by capturing and going back. And the lion also has restrictions. You can't capture another protected lion, except by capturing right next to it, like this. So you can't use the range movement to capture another lion. There are a few other restrictions that we won't talk about right now, but that's the main one. Then, after Chushogi, we have Standard Shogi. But Standard Shogi wasn't always the way it is now. Originally, it did not use the drop rule, and because of that, it was very simple and was considered a child's game. However, when drops were added, it immediately became very popular and surpassed both Chu Shogi and Dai Shogi. However, that's not the end of the story. Simultaneously, people were also creating board games that were even bigger than Dai Shogi. These went first to Dai Dai Shogi, Big Big Shogi, which I've actually played before. The game is still unfinished because this board is huge and also it's been a bit on and off. But this has even more variety of pieces. There's rooks that can move twice per turn, similar to the sort of lion concept. And there are bishops that can move twice per turn. But it gets bigger. After Dai Shogi, there's Maka Dai Dai Shogi, which is huge, big shogi. And this is just crazy. This is where we first have the emperor. The emperor is the promotion of the king. In all of the previous variants, the king could never promote. Now the king promotes to yet another piece, which can move to any undefended square in the whole board and is therefore almost impossible to checkmate. But because of even more extremely strong pieces, it's still possible for this game to be won, even after king promotion. But it gets bigger. After Makadai Daishogi is Tai Shogi. After Dai Dai Shogi, because the enemy camp where you would normally promote has become bigger and bigger, pieces are now promoting by capturing other pieces. In Makadai Daishogi, the king starts as an emperor. So already, this piece can move to any square on the board. The only issue is that it's not as powerful as it seems because the enemy emperor can also move to any square on the board. So, every single square on the board is already currently protected, which is a little bit confusing to think about, but this emperor is actually very restricted and is only powerful once the enemy emperor has been checkmated. After which, it's not the end of the game because there's already a crown prince. This was also present in Maka Daidai Shogi. And the crown prince is basically another king. So, by Maka Daidai Shogi, there are already two kings at the start of the game, and they have an extremely powerful promotion. By Tai Shogi, the kings start as that extremely powerful promotion, but it gets bigger. Although the next step, Taikyoku Shogi, isn't present in this application, there's another application that does have it, called the Ludai Player, and this is Taikyoku Shogi. Taikyoku Shogi was, I believe, only discovered recently, and it's just so massive that it doesn't even display properly on this screen. But it's just incomprehensibly huge. There's a really funny video on the internet. I'll put it in the description of two Japanese regular shogi pros playing Taikyoku Shogi. It was done on some sort of show as a joke. But it really does show how absolutely massive and just impractical this board game really is. I did skip one game intentionally because Tenjik Shogi, which we'll go back to AI for, is just so completely different from the rest of the linear progression of small to big. Because Tenjik Shogi is just packed with extremely powerful pieces. The lion that looked powerful in Shushogi, no. It's like the equivalent of a pawn. In this game, a simple pawn move threatens checkmate. If you just do anything but something like this, okay, let's undo that. If you play this, for example, this is checkmate. Because Tenjik Shogi has pieces that function like bishops, rooks, and queens, but they can jump over any number of pieces that are lower or equal ranked. This is the vice general. It moves like a bishop, plus it has an area move. That is, it can move to any square within, I believe, a 3x3 area around it. But this is checkmate because it moves like a bishop and it is diagonally attacking the king. But all the pieces blocking do not help because the vice general can just jump over them. They're lower ranking pieces. And the king is basically trapped by its own pieces. This is a smothered checkmate in two moves. Tenjik Shogi's original rule set was a forced win for the first player. That was found out in the early 2000s by actually a very competitive, serious player base that Tenjik Shogi still has. But afterwards, they created another rule set with some modifications where it's still extremely just incomprehensibly sharp and dangerous, but it's not a forced win. Yet. They'll probably find one because it's just way too easy to checkmate in this game. Yeah, so that's all the shogi variants. We've gone through most of the other main categories. There are still the larger Middle Eastern variants, which you can find in AIAI under chess and then historical. But those are fairly similar. They have some unique pieces, but they just don't have the really crazy pieces that the shogi variants have. So yeah, that's all of them. I hope you play at least one. Like I said, Lee Shogi does have a True Shogi Discord server where you can find people to play against, and there are people crazy enough to play the larger variants too, if you find them interesting. Thank you for watching.